All right, today's indoor air quality. This is one of my absolute favorites. I've given it 2 other times before, so this is a 3rd time. Maybe that's why we didn't get as many people here. But the reason I like this one is because to me it really epitomizes naturopathic medicine, because it's how do we all forget that the air around us is just like, us breathing, fish breathing dirty water from a dirty tank. We forget how important the air around us is, and we forget that lung diseases are the 6th cause of morbidity or death for 65 and 85 and older. So like our lung health is extremely, extremely important, and we don't think about it a whole lot. So this is some just numbers and statistics on how many breaths we take each day. This is a picture of India, but it's outdoor air, and we're going to be really focusing on indoor air, but it's still sort of astonishing that in polluted cities, like the one shown in this picture, just breathing the air normally is like 44 cigarettes, and that's just insane. So it really makes a huge difference, and those toxins build up. Luckily, our outdoor air is a lot cleaner. In most places, even in Los Angeles when I was growing up, it was pretty bad, but it's a lot better now. I didn't know that you could see the mountains from the block that I grew up on until I came back as an adult, because they had cleaned up the air so much that it was a huge difference. Okay, so this is what I was just saying, that if you add up all of the lung issues, and I have 3 of them circled here. I have COVID, and then chronic lower respiratory diseases and influenza and pneumonia. You add them together, and it's one of our top causes of death in this country. So it's something, it's the 3rd leading cause of death if you consider all lung issues together. And so cancer and heart disease being 1st and 2nd, right? So lungs are important. Okay, so how much of our life do we actually spend indoors? And it's astonishing, I'm going to use that word again, 87% of our time. And that's not just our home, but also our work and going to malls and other places. We spend a huge amount of time indoors. And so our indoor air quality in our home and in our workplaces and everywhere else is extremely important. And so what do we need to know about air quality? Well, there's a lot, and there's so much that I've broken up this lecture really into 2, because I have a whole nother lecture on growing fresh air and plants and all of that. So this one's really going to be focused on a little bit on particulate matter, and then on relative humidity. You're going to understand why, but see if I can get my laser pointer. Oh, look at that, it worked. Right. Okay, so we consume 8 times as much air by volume as food, and 4 times as much air as water. That's crazy. I mean, when you think about some of these numbers, indoor air contains 2 to 5 as much pollution compared to outdoor air. So our indoor air is way more polluted, even if we can't see it. And a while back, I can't remember the exact year, but LEED buildings started becoming real popular, like making buildings really tight so they'd be energy efficient. And that's actually, we're finding, causing a lot of health problems. Because the leaky buildings that we had before allowed air flow and air exchange, and now the tight buildings are causing problems with carbon dioxide buildup in your bedroom and all kinds of things. So it's an interesting conundrum, how do we be ecologically friendly and come up with a house that, we don't have to burn a lot of fuel, but at the same time not jeopardize our health, and it is an issue. Air pollution is one of the top 5 factors causing chronic disease, according to the World Health Organization. We're going to see a little clip of that too. So here's a whole bunch of factors affecting our indoor air quality. And so today we're really going to focus on relative humidity and solutes. And we're going to touch upon the rest of these a little bit, but these are the big ones that's going to help keep your family healthy more than you ever understood. Okay, so why does indoor air make us sick? And it's because of all of these things. There's a lot of stuff in the air, including volatile organic compounds, but it's also the moisture in the air allows things to float, and it affects the float time, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so just another picture that's saying the same thing. Where do we get the toxins in our air? These are all the places it comes from. Okay, this is an interesting slide I included, because volatile organic compounds are important because they change the solute composition of the water molecules in the air. And as you're going to find out here in a few minutes, if we can control the solutes that are in the water molecules floating around in the air, we can make a big difference on killing infectious pathogens in the air. So where do we get some of these solutes? Well, some of the solutes come from our body. Like, we create them. We emit them from our own skin. So our skin creates ammonia, and 90% from our skin, 10% from our breath. So ammonia in the air affects the solutes, and that can increase pathogen viability, right? So, but we can't like tell our skin to stop emitting it, but it is an interesting fact because sometimes in workplaces or a room like this, when we have tons and tons of people in the room, we are actually creating an environment through just the ammonia coming off our skin that makes, if somebody sneezes, makes the pathogen more viable, meaning more likely to live and to be transmitted. So we need to figure out how we can counterbalance all of that. So here's just a picture representing all warm microbes and where they come from. Okay, so here's more about volatile organic compounds. They tested in this one study, 200 they found in a well-ventilated classroom at Berkeley, was it? I think it was Berkeley. Yeah, Berkeley. And 70 students in the class. Most of them came from their personal care products, specifically deodorant, which is interesting. So as we're warm, we start emitting, we start releasing these volatile organic compounds into the air. So it's interesting. So antiperspirants were the big ones. And then as the day went on, there was considerably less in the room that was measured. So mornings were the worst. And that was fascinating. So here again, this is the study that talks about it. Okay, so what is in our air? This is also an important part of how we can control the safety and the health of our air, is we have nitrogen in the air, that's the biggest component, and then we have oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other gases. So carbon dioxide is an important one that I talk a lot about in my Growing Fresh Air lecture, because it helps with cognitive function and all kinds of things. It decreases cognitive function the higher carbon dioxide raises. And so that in our bedrooms, this is particularly important because they found in bedrooms that are sealed very well, that has 2 adults in it, if the bedroom does not have an HVAC system, like a heating and ventilation system, it's just the air's off, you will easily exceed healthy carbon dioxide levels in the bedroom. So you need to crack a little window, and somehow, but if you have an HVAC system that the ventilation turns on and off, that's fantastic. This time of year, it's nice to just open your windows if you can, but there's a lot of dust from the leaves, so it's difficult to think what you want to do. A lot of people can turn the fan function on, so they don't have to have the air conditioner on or the heater on, they just turn the fan on for the HVAC system. That would be a great way to get air exchange. So this right here, these are 2 different carbon dioxide sensors, and it's extremely important to be monitoring that in your home, especially your bedroom. And so I have 2 right over here. I have 2 of them that are very inexpensive, and they're telling us what the carbon dioxide in here right now is, which I believe is 405, and what does the one on the right say?
406.
406. Okay, so they're pretty close. 400 is considered outside air, that's parts per million. And anything that's between 400 and 600 is fantastic for your house. So that would be what you are after. And if you see something different than that, as it starts getting closer to 600 and higher, you're going to start having cognitive decline as you breathe the air. So you don't want to be working in a stuffy office all day long with the carbon dioxide too high. This is a carbon dioxide hazard scale. So bedroom ventilation, poor bedroom ventilation can be that high. And you have major cognitive dysfunction lower than that, right? So 400 is right here. That's typical outdoor, like I said. I didn't experiment in my own bedroom where I just closed, the windows and turned off the ventilation, and it was about 450 when I started and went to bed, and the next morning with just me in the room, it was like 780, right? So double if you have 2 people in the room. So it's interesting to measure what your situation is in your own house. Okay, so our own household activities are sources of indoor pollutants, and if you read down here, they talk about how when they simulated making breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the parts per million of toxins that were in the air really went high. And so it's just, the point I'm trying to make is everything we do, including just existing, the ammonia coming off our skin, makes a difference to the air. And okay, so this is a graph from that same study, a couple graphs, that show breakfast, what happened to the toxins in the air, beef chili, when they made beef chili, what was happening to the toxins. And, stir fry, hot plate, lasagna, toast, what made different toxins that were measurable in the air. And so like in our house, we put a HEPA filter in the room adjacent to the kitchen that has an open doorway, just so we can get the air filtered. Try to get some of that out of our breathing environment. But here's some other two big ones. The gas stoves have been in the news a whole lot lately about, how bad they are. They are linked to childhood asthma, but the thing is you can put a filter, in your house and get rid of that. It's just good to know. So I love wood stoves. In fact, this was mine in medical school. This is a picture of my own wood stove. And so you should have, if you have a wood stove or a fireplace, and maybe you only use it a couple times a year, put an air filter in that room. It's worth putting an air filter in that room so you're not inadvertently contaminating your lungs, because we got to take care of our lungs. Okay, so what do I use? So these are the two that I use. So I have one that's right here. So this one is that one. And I can turn it on afterwards so you can see what it sounds like, and it works very, very well. It is a HEPA filter, and it's a good price for the level of filtration that it does. So right now, we're talking largely about particulate matter being removed, but it does a super good job. And then this is one that is on sale at Costco occasionally, and it works really well. And so I used to have that one in my bedroom, but now I have this one in my bedroom. And the lights turn off automatically at night, although I still put a piece of electrical tape over the one little light. But it's very quiet, and it's all automated. So it senses if it needs to go on a higher speed or not, right? Which is fantastic. This one's all manual, right? So like I have to turn it to a higher speed. But this one, like it just adjusts itself automatically. So let's say I have the window open, which I these days often do, and my dad is leaf blowing, out in the driveway, which happens occasionally this time of year. My filter in my bedroom will this one will turn red, and it immediately goes, because the dust from outside makes its way all the way to the second floor, up through my bedroom window, and this thing senses it and then immediately goes on to high and will filter it out. So I've been very, very impressed with this filter, and something to think about. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So most people who have HVAC systems have the filters that you put behind the little metal grate, right? Are you guys familiar with that, right? So that's what this is, and they come in different sizes and all those kinds of things. How many of you are familiar with a MERV rating? Do you know what that is? Okay, so like this one, I had to look everywhere to find it, and it is on here, and it was unimpressive. It was like MERV, here it is right here. So if you look on the bottom of the paper right here it says MERV 10 right on it, okay? And so we're going to talk about what that means, but you want to get, I prefer at least 13. So this one, we're going to use it up. It's our last one. We're going to make sure we use it, but in the future, 13 is a really good one because it can actually filter out bacteria and viruses. Now it does make it more, it's not as energy efficient for your HVAC system because it has to push more, right? And that's something to consider if your system's about to break. Maybe you don't want to stress it that much, but it is something, all things being equal, if you can choose a higher MERV rating, I recommend it because it can get these two, which is what we're after. Okay, so this describes, and this is for your reference for later, so you can go and read like what each of the ratings do, and but the picture was a good one. When you step it up past MERV 8, you start to experience a higher degree of air filtration. With 11, you can catch smog, pet dander, all kinds of things. So, especially with leaf stuff going around, having a MERV 13 is great. It really cleans the air. Okay, so here we go. These are particularly helpful for those who are sensitive to infections. So that's why I mentioned 13 as being like the cutoff. But you can get higher than MERV 13. You can get MERV 17. And it'll remove, they say, formaldehyde, and something to think about. Okay, so this is just a graph or a graphical image that sort of represents what is a particle size of 2.5, and 10, and so this gives you a feel for how many microns these filters are catching when they refer to it. Say down to 2.5 or 10, you'll know what they're talking about. So dust and pollen are PM10. Okay, so odors. This is something I wanted to mention because it is an aspect of our air quality. Odors typically come from volatile organic compounds, so they're more common in rooms crowded with people, but also in your bathroom when you smell odors or when you open your refrigerator. So this one right here is this. I'll show you guys. This is a different brand, but they're probably all made in the same factory. But you plug it into your wall and then you turn it on, and I can do that later. And it creates a small amount of ozone, and it will kill the odors very, very well. So if I think my closet's smelling, I'll put it in the closet and turn it on for a half an hour. You don't need to turn it on the whole time, and you don't need to be in the room with it on. So like, let's say I go to the bathroom and I think I made the bathroom smell bad. I'll close the bathroom door and turn this on for half an hour and then turn it off, and it'll kill all the bad smells. I've also used, but ozone is not good to breathe, directly with your lungs, so I wouldn't put it in a room and just have it going all day long. You want to put it in a closet or a room when you're not in it to kill any smells. This is one that I use. It's also an ozone generator, and it's portable, which is nice. So like after I use the sauna, I can put this in the sauna to make sure, like if I sweated a bunch and I felt like if I made the sauna smell stuffy, this will make the sauna smell fresher. I've also put this in refrigerators before to make them smell better. You can smell it a little bit, right? And it's very mild, and there's several settings, but you guys can try that out afterwards and see what you think. But it does an excellent job of killing odors, all smells, bad smells from dogs, cats, anything, urine. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how do infections spread? Well, a fomite is a surface that a pathogen has settled onto or has been touched by someone else who's sick, who has the virus or the bacteria or the pathogen on their hands, and then you go and touch that surface. So that surface that did the spreading is the fomite. Okay, so typically at workplaces it's keyboards or door handles, tables, that you put your hands on, chairs, those are the things that would be a fomite. And then you can inhale it and those kinds of other things too. Okay, so now we're going to get to what I consider the really fun part of this whole lecture, is how does humidity affect transmissibility of infectious airborne pathogens? And the reality is the humidity is the most important thing on whether or not an airborne pathogen stays airborne or falls and settles out of the air, okay? And the solutes that are in the aerosolized water molecules that are in our air, the solutes that are in them can either kill the pathogen or support the pathogen to live longer, okay? So we want to control our humidity, the humidity. So here, this is what I just said. The airborne droplet nuclei, that's the size of the airborne water molecule. Basically, when the air is super dry, when someone sneezes, the pathogen go into the air because they become aerosolized from the sneeze, and they can stay in the air 2 to 3 weeks. So you can be continuing to breathe if it's about 30 to 40% humidity, relative humidity. So dry air is very not good for health, especially in a building where we share the air like this. I don't want to be breathing someone's sneeze from 2 weeks ago, or even early in the morning. We want to get that pathogen out of the air, and that has to do with float time. Okay, so they can suspend for several hours to weeks. So here they talk about float duration in the air. So the float time for a larger water molecule, and these are molecules still, they're way too small to see. You can't see them, right? It will settle in 6 seconds. But if it's this small, right, then it's 11 hours and then 41 hours or longer, right, depending on the size. And what determines this size? It's the relative humidity. That's what determines the size of the aerosolized molecules. So if you look right here, what is the optimal air humidity for humans? And if you look, this is 40, this line right here, and this one's 60. And if you look, nothing's growing here. Fungi, viruses, mites, bacteria, allergic rhinitis, respiratory tract infections. this is the sweet spot right here, meaning that's where things don't like to live. So let's keep going. In humidity above 40%, supersaturated solutes, that would be salt. Let's use that would be an example of a supersaturated solute. In the infectious aerosol, inactivate the microbes and protect us from infections. In other words, if you can get salt into your air, right, and dissolved into those aerosolized water molecules, it will kill the pathogen, okay? The water-containing droplets will settle faster because they're heavier than dry, right? And they have a shorter flow time than in lower humidity. So below 40% relative humidity, that would be like 30% or 20%, which is really dry air. The infectious droplets lose their water content and become dry aerosols. So here's their illustration of a dry aerosol. The microbes get incorporated into the structures of the solutes and are preserved. So they last longer, right? They won't die, they don't die. And so even if they finally, after 41 hours or whatever, they finally settle down to the surface, they're still active. You touch them, you can still spread them because they're gonna live, they're gonna be preserved. And so floating time and the number of microbes is increased compared to soap. So basically what it's saying is you want a wet aerosol, not a dry aerosol. So you have to keep, in the wintertime, that's when our indoor air typically becomes very dry because we turn our heaters on and dries everything out. So it's a struggle a little bit to keep your air at 50%, but that's the sweet spot, between 40 and 60, but 50 being the sweet spot. Okay, so here's the article, one study that shows how supersaturated aerosols, particularly salt, makes a big difference. So I didn't just make that up. And here's again the activity of expiratory aerosols. That's when we exhale, we are exhaling moisture from our lungs, and it basically, the acidity of what we exhale affects the viability of airborne influenza and COVID, right? So we need to affect the pH of the air too. And you can do this all different ways. In fact, I'm going to show you some very inexpensive ways over here to do exactly what you need to do. Okay, so two biological human processes have an opposite effect on aerosols. We already learned that ammonia is basic, and so it promotes the pathogens to survive and live, right? But nitric acid will drop it, and our breath releases, carbon dioxide also is considered an acid, so when it's mixed with moisture, it's carbonic acid. But then our skin produces ammonia. So I guess this is just an interesting fact because we're not going to stop exhaling, and we're not going to change what our breath is, and we're not going to change how much we sweat, right? I do think it's interesting, like if I was a gym owner and I owned a gym or a place, I would probably be monitoring the carbon dioxide level in the air, and I would be monitoring a lot to make sure that we were not, because everyone's exhaling a lot of moisture from their lungs, and I want to make sure the relative humidity is high enough that everything settles down in 6 seconds, right? Okay, so why do we care about moist air? So not only does it make the aerosols in the air larger, so they have less of a float time, but it also is critical for our mucus, the lining in our nasal passages, to get rid of pathogens, okay? Because we have these cilia, and the cilia move, and I'm going to show you some links to that, but basically if you're not wet enough in the mucus, if you're too dry, it creates permeability, and the pathogens can get in, they can take root in your nasal mucosa and stick and adhere more because the cilia can't do their job to get it out, okay? So you want wet, moist nasal passages. I have over here my favorite way of cleaning out your nasal passages is this little bottle. You use a neti pot, but this little bottle works fantastic, and everyone should have one. Just get a toothbrush. So in fact, maybe more important, or just as important as a toothbrush for sure. That's one way. Okay, so we're going to keep going. Okay, so mucociliary clearance, it goes for your lungs as well. So your lungs also are able to get mucus out, expectorate. And you do this through the beating of the cilia. And the cilia will work properly better at a relative humidity of 50 to 100%, right? That's what you want. So 100%, that'd be like water, but like 50 is perfect. So that, once again, we're talking about 50%. So in your head, if you walk away with anything, it's 50% is the sweet spot. And we may go back and show some videos here. Oh, actually, maybe I'll show one. See. and they'll talk about how the mucus works with humidity. We may have to listen to an advertisement first. I don't know. We're going to find out. Can you hear anything? There we go.
Contains foreign matter such as dust, bacteria, and pollen. Hair-like cells called cilia, as well as goblet cells, can be found in the lining of the respiratory tract called the respiratory epithelium. Goblet cells secrete viscous mucus that forms a layer to trap foreign material.
Thank you.
The wave-like action of the underlying cilia mobilizes the mucus layer, removing the foreign matter and preventing it from entering the lungs.
And that's basically it. There you go. Interesting 40 seconds. Okay, so let's keep going. So now I'm going to show you a bunch of studies that came to the exact same conclusion. A little bit. Hold on, it's got to. This happened last time.
I'm not a magician. I'm a scientist.
There we go. I don't know why it automatically starts the next video. Sorry about that. So let's see here. Slideshow from current slide. Okay. So what we're looking at here is virus particles are stable, and basically this is a dry aerosol, meaning they're going to live. They are happy. They're dry. They're preserved. Then, as you increase the relative humidity, and you get to 50% right here, virus particles are unstable. Okay. But then you don't want to go too much higher than 60 because then they become stable again, right? And then you also have mold problems in your house and those kinds of things. So let's go to the next, but it's interesting. So the dashed line is 68 degrees. That's why I'm focusing on this, because that's our house temperature. This is too cold, right? But temperature does affect it, so that's why I wanted to show this one as well. Okay, so here's another one. This is super interesting to me. The red line represents healthcare associated infections in 10 monitored rooms in a hospital. Okay, so this is how, when you're in a hospital, you're getting the infectious pathogens from other people in the hospital are being acquired by other people, because that's what healthcare associated infections. Okay, and if you look, these are the months of the year. And interestingly, it goes way down in the summer, right? And then it goes up in the winter, in the winter time, right? It's because the heater this is an association, but it is interesting. And then this is the relative humidity that was in the rooms at the time. So once again, we're seeing that if they could get the humidity high enough, then the healthcare associated infections goes down. So if you don't want to transmit viruses in your home or pathogens, infectious pathogens to each other, then keep your humidity high enough. That goes for daycares and everything. Daycares and gyms especially should be monitoring their relative humidity. Here's another study where they have staphylococcus and pneumococcus, and so all these pathogens. And this little green zone right here, can you see the light green a little bit? Between 50 and 60% relative humidity, this is decay rate, meaning death. Right? Everything dies in this zone right here. Okay? So here's this one. This is both temperature and humidity have a significant effect on pathogen viability in indoor air. And if you look right here, the only one that's really pertinent, in my opinion, is the blue line, because that represents our indoor air temperature. This would be like a desert, and this is like outdoor temperatures, right? Really cold. But right here is our room temperature, and once again, this is inactivation of viruses. Right here, right? And this is inactivation of SARS coronavirus. Right? This is stuff that we should all know, right? We should all have known this. And so then, this is interesting right here, another study. Humidification of the air to 50% relative humidity reduces the viable viruses to less than 1% in 2 days. Okay? So it's just humidity, right? So significantly decreases the risk of infection. That's this right here, right? Relative humidity, 50%. So this is, to me, interesting that none of us really heard about this on the news. What we should be all keeping our houses when we had lockdown and we were all stuck in our houses, right? This would have been good information to know. So here it is. High humidity leads to loss of infectious influenza virus from simulated coughs. So the conclusion, if you read the conclusion, I blew it up. Maintaining indoor relative humidity over 40 will significantly reduce the infectivity of aerosolized virus, once again, okay? So here's the room, like I was like, well, what do you mean from a cough simulator? That's what it said, from a cough simulator, right? Some simulated coughs. What does that mean? So they built a room. They built a room and they had a breathing simulator and a coughing simulator, and they had pathogens that they cultured and they put in the lungs that were emitted and aerosolized into the air. And then they controlled the humidity and they wanted to know, would the breathing person get it in their lungs and would it grow? Would it actually grow in their lungs, right? And that's how they were able to come up with this conclusion right here. Okay? So this has been studied over and over again. Hospitals know this, you know, but they don't always use it. I don't know why we don't always use this information. So how do we do it? How do we keep our humidity high enough in our homes? Well, I use these things right here, and after the lecture I can tell you my pros and cons. These ones right here in the bottles, the sparkling water bottles, work really well. These two little white ones, and they were $1 each, and they will rapidly increase the humidity of any room. But you can use, there's just a lot of different ones. So, am I the only one who's like heard of this? You know, no. The answer is this woman right here, who's an MD, she made a website called 40 to 60 RH for relative humidity. And she got a petition going, and over 5,000 MDs signed it to try to get the word out. You know, there's now overwhelming scientific evidence that mid-range air humidity has significant benefits for human health, right? So take a look at this website. It's still active, and you know, and science has shown 3 reasons why we should always maintain 40 to 60% in public buildings like hospitals, schools, and offices. So they were trying to make you know, a mandate or a rule or something, you know, recommendation to get workplaces and offices and daycares and gyms to keep their humidity, especially during COVID at 40 to 60. I don't think it ever got out there. This is from their website right here. Once again, it helps with your mucociliary clearance, right? That's what this is. It helps the float time go down and all the things we already talked about. This is a summary. Okay, so this is an interesting, during COVID, there was a White House summit on indoor air quality that was very long, 3 hours and 16 minutes. And at minute 49:40, they answered the questions that somebody asked on, do you have a recommendation for our humidity? And they said, yes, they do. So we're going to listen to it because I thought it was worth, it only takes a second, and let's see if it'll come up properly at the right minute.
I'd like now to invite Jordan Kelly Linden from the Telegraph to ask the next question. Jordan, can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. A petition has been widely circulating calling for global guidelines on indoor humidity to be drawn up amid concerns that dry weather air could provide a perfect storm for successful coronavirus transmission. The petition calls for regulations on indoor air quality to include a humidity level of 40 to 60% relative humidity. Is the WHO aware of this petition? Has the WHO considered this? And what does the organisation think of the evidence suggesting SARS-CoV-2 transmits more effectively in dry air?
So thank you for the question. Yes, we are aware of that petition that's been circulating for some time. There's different ways in which relative humidity affects the ability for the virus to spread. If you have low relative humidity, that will favor survival of the viruses on surfaces, for example. If you have high relative humidity, it can favor respiratory droplet circulation or suspension of droplets in the air. We have been working with the Global Heat Health Information Network, which is a combination of researchers from WHO, the World Meteorological Organization, and the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the U.S., and have set some guidance on ideal temperatures for rooms and also ideal relative humidity of between 50 and 60%.
There you go. So, to me, what was fascinating about that is we didn't ever hear about that, right? It wasn't on the news, and as far as I know. So I listened to the whole 3 hours and 16 minutes. Because indoor, yes?
Sorry, what was the ideal room temperature then?
They say around 70, so if you look at the studies in here, you'll see it's around 70 degrees. But the colder, the better. But it's not totally 100%. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because they vary, you know. But if you can keep your room between 65 and 70, then you want your humidity 50. And she just said 50 to 60, if you notice. She didn't even say 40 to 50, she said 50 to 60. And I agree with her. So from the studies I've looked at, if you have to err on one side of the 50, err on the higher side. But remember, closer you get to 60, you start getting mold problems. So you really, like, 50 is the sweet spot. Maybe 50 to 55 would be perfect, you know, if you have to have a little zone in there. Right now in this room, we're at 52 and 54 according to those two. And what are these ones? This one I found, these two do better carbon dioxide, and they don't do very well at measuring relative humidity. That one's a 62. So there's definitely a tolerance involved in some of these, but we're gonna keep going. But these are some of the other things that I learned or I found interesting from the 3 hours. I just took these snippets out. The person who manages your building has a greater impact on your health than your doctor. I think that's a fascinating statement, and I tend to agree. It's one of the healthy buildings represent the single greatest public health opportunity of our lifetime. And school classrooms should have 4 to 6 air changes per hour. And then they go in, so indoor air quality sensors should include carbon dioxide, relative humidity, and temperature. And I agree, that's why I have these sensors over here, right? And then we should definitely, all of these say the same thing. We need to be more actively paying attention to our air quality. Okay, so this one says the same thing, relative humidity. The same virus is inactivated within 15 minutes at 56 degrees Celsius. That's very high. That's super hot in this case, right? But that's not reasonable because we're not going to live in that kind of environment. Okay, so this is another doctor, and you can watch this one later because I don't think we're going to, well, maybe we have time. She says the same thing, basically, 40 to 60%, and there's a whole bunch of, on this particular clip, of doctors that were on the news talking about, so I say we didn't hear it, but there was a few news stories that were out there with people saying, let's see here, I think I got it on. And I don't know why the volume's being wonky, but we'll see. Maybe we could skip that, skip.
How dry indoor air fosters the presence of more infectious bacteria and viruses. So I would say, you know, we can't ignore this, nor do we want to ignore this.
Scientists say that dry air lets viral particles survive longer. Dry air also damages the ability of our noses and lungs to get rid of the viruses if we breathe them in. And to top it off, researchers say dry winter air is interfering with parts of our immune system called interferons that help fight off infections.
So
We found that the low humidity impairs the expression of these interferon and interferon C.
And I didn't even bring up interferon and all the other aspects of immunity that is helped by the humidity, because I think it's a lower important reason. Let's see if I can get back to my slideshow. Okay, so this is out there. This information's out there, and it's easy for us to do something about. Here are what we need to know. Standing 2 meters opposite an infected person is not safe without a protective mask. They've proved that in this study right here, okay? Evolution of sprayed aerosol from respiratory releases. Unprotected cough is not safe at any reasonable distance to an infected individual because the jet goes super far when someone sneezes. It's just super, super far. Okay, so I have it in red. Suspended aerosols resulting from speaking and singing and removal by gravity, by just allowing the natural settling, is not good enough, okay? It doesn't even start till 20 minutes later. So it'll still be circulating around the air and everyone's gonna be breathing it in, right? But downward flow air currents help. It can remove the suspended virus in less than 10 seconds, and the risk can be reduced factor of 3 if there are 10 air changes per hour, which just means you need to have your ventilation system on, right, circulating the air. You don't want stagnant air. That's basically what this is saying. So down air is good. You want downward air. So like, well, in this room, that would be like a ceiling fan. right? So we have a ceiling fan counterclockwise and clockwise. It doesn't matter. Either way, you have downward and upward current, and that will push it down and it will not come back up. Okay? So it's a way to get stuff out of the air. So if you have a fan and you want to use it, go for it. It will help get the viruses and the pathogens out of the air. Okay, vortex fans work too. They're a lot more forceful. Try to point the fan downward if you can. Now here's factor of 3 to 10 air changes per hour, which means you need to circulate air, open your windows, get air exchanges in the rooms you're in. This is an online tool. I find it sort of rinky-dink, but it's interesting. Let's say you know you have a visitor who's coming over and they are sick. This tells you how long you need to have different ventilation going to try to get 99% of the virus out of the air. Improve your ventilation. They say side to side and cross is fantastic, right? Or stacked. And this is all the recommendations from the World Health Organization. This is like a 90-page document. I don't know if anyone ever knows that it existed, but it's a roadmap to improve and ensure good indoor ventilation in the context. And so I'm just summarizing here what this 90-page document says. So cross flow. So if you have 2 windows across from each other, definitely do that. Okay, so now we're talking about breathing airborne salts right here, right, and COVID incidents. So it helps. That's basically it. If you can get salt into your air and you can breathe it, halotherapy they call it, is when you breathe salt, it can help a lot because the salt kills bacteria. So how do we get salt into our air? Ions. Now, these are the ones that I use right here. And that's what's up on the screen, but you know, I took the screen capture so long ago that I'm not sure it's still 1220, right? But that's what it was when I bought it, you know? And there's night lights too. I put, in our house, a Himalayan salt night light in every bathroom, because that's where a lot of pathogens are. It's where you blow our noses and everything. And then I use this one in my bedroom, so that one right there is in my bedroom, because it maximizes the surface area of the rocks, of the salt rocks, so you're going to get more salt ions in the air than like the solid salt lamp right there. But both of them will work. There's all different kinds of ways to get moisture in the air, but this one right here was one that I bought, which we'll show you right over here. It's that one. So this is an interesting study. It talks about what essential oils could you add to those diffusers, you know, in addition to the water, that have been proven to kill viruses. And the answer is right here. Cinnamon, carrot, eucalyptus, and rosemary was studied in blend 1. Blend 2 had cinnamon, carrot, clove, and oregano. And both of them were proved to be effective against H1N1 and all these different things. And so there you go. They are highly antiviral blends. So I have them over here for you to smell and take a look at. I used to blend them myself. I'd buy the 4 oils and blend them, but I have a couple other ones here that are pre-blended that are fantastic, and they work really good. So here they are. So carrot, cinnamon, eucalyptus, rosemary, oregano, clove. Those are the oils that were talked about in that study, right? And then this is the one that I use right here, and I have that over there. You can smell it. It smells medicinal. It doesn't smell good, but it, in my opinion, not super bad, but it will definitely, the oregano has an affinity for the lungs, and it will kill viruses in the lungs for sure. And then this one's a great blend too. It has clove, which is highly antiviral, and then eucalyptus, rosemary, and lemon. So lemon's not in the study, but this is a lot cheaper per ounce. So it's something to think about. And okay. So these are the ones, the oils that are in the one that I like to use when people are sick in my home. And it's bay laurel, eucalyptus, oregano, tea tree, and thyme. And thyme is just as effective as oregano in the respiratory system, which is why I like this blend a lot. It's good for respiratory. Okay, so I have 2 of the monitors right here. I got them for $20, so $10 each. You can get them even cheaper now. I believe you can get like 6 packs. These ones have a magnet on the back, so we have one we just stick on the refrigerator in the kitchen, and then I have one upstairs, you know, so that way we can monitor our humidity in our house. And then here is my summary of tips of the whole presentation. Keep your indoor humidity 40 to 60. Air should change the space 5 times an hour, so try to create air exchange. circulate the air, filter the air with MERV-13 and HEPA filters, add solutes to the air, and then you can also do disinfecting and sanitizing if you believe somebody has been in the space that you know for sure is really sick, right? And I have this light right here, which I can demonstrate in a little while, but this is a UV sanitizing light. You have to get the right power and the right wavelength for it to actually disinfect properly. But if I have guests over in our guest room, I will put that light on. It is damaging to your eyes, so you have to, it has a remote control, and you turn it on after you leave the room, right? And then you leave it on, it has a timer, and 20 minutes will sterilize any fomites, right? Any viruses and pathogens that are on surfaces, it will sterilize it. And so that's that. And so I've left a few minutes left here, like 11 minutes, so we can all talk about what we want over there. Yes, go for it.
Did you ever have to recharge the salt lamps in